So, if you've ever bought an orchid, I'm willing to bet you've been given one single, kind of cryptic piece of advice, right? It's supposed to be this huge secret to success, but honestly, for most of us, it just brings up a ton of new questions. Well, today, we're going to pull back that curtain and figure out what on earth it actually means. And there it is, the mantra: water weekly. Weekly. It gets passed down from the absolute pros to nervous first-timers, and I'm telling you, it is the most important rule in orchid care. It sounds so simple, right? But the secret to getting those lush leaves and incredible blooms, it's all locked up inside these three little words.
Exactly. That's the real question, isn't it? How weak is weekly? And does weekly mean every single Friday, no matter what? These are the questions we're going to tackle. And by the time we're done here, you won't just get the science behind it. You'll know exactly how to use this phrase to get some absolutely incredible results.
Okay, so to really get how to feed an orchid, we first have to basically forget everything we know about regular houseplants. We need to go back to where they come from, because for most orchids, that's not in a pot of dirt. It's a life lived up in the air on the side of a tree. This right here is the first, most critical piece of the puzzle. An orchid that's clinging to tree bark isn't, dipping its roots into a big buffet of nutrients like a tomato plant in your garden. It's basically an air plant, and it's perfectly designed for a life of just catching whatever the world happens to bring its way.
So, how do they even eat out there? Well, they get a little bit from dust floating in the air, a little from rainwater that's trickling down the tree, and some more from tiny bits of leaves and stuff that get trapped around their roots. But here's the kicker. The last point on the slide is everything. Those nutrients are always super diluted and they get delivered all the time, a tiny bit with every single rain shower. This is the exact natural process that Weekly Weakly is trying to copy.
The whole secret to how orchids survive like this and, why they're so sensitive to our attempts to feed them, it all comes down to the crazy anatomy of their roots.
This is the velamen, and it's a really cool adaptation. Just think of it like a high-tech sponge that's wrapped around the real living root inside. Its only job is to instantly grab onto any bit of moisture and any dissolved nutrients that it touches. It's incredibly efficient, but it has one major weakness.
And this is that weakness in action. See, unlike a living membrane, that velamen sponge can't pick and choose. It just sucks up everything. So if you hit it with a strong fertilizer, it soaks up all those concentrated salts. This creates a huge problem. All those salts on the outside actually start pulling water out of the living root. It's literally a chemical burn from the inside out. That process, plasmolysis, that's what gives you those mushy, brown, dead roots.
Okay, so we know we need a really weak solution to avoid frying the roots, but what exactly should be in that solution? Let's dive into the chemistry for a second. All right, nitrogen. It's the main fuel for growth, but it turns out not all nitrogen is created equal. The form of that nitrogen really matters. You've got nitrate, which is fantastic for building strong, sturdy leaves. Then you have ammonium, which is like a quick energy boost. And then there's urea, which for the longest time was totally misunderstood in the orchid world. Yep, for decades, growers were told to avoid urea like the plague. The thinking was that orchids just couldn't process it. But as it turns out, modern science has shown that for a lot of common orchids, like the Phalaenopsis you probably have at home, that's just not true. They can and do absorb it directly. It's a perfect example of how we're always learning more. And all this science brings us to what many people consider the gold standard, the Michigan State University, or MSU, formulas. And they are brilliant because they solve a really common problem. See, if you're using pure water, like from a reverse osmosis filter or just rainwater, you need the version that adds calcium and magnesium. But if your tap water is already super hard and full of minerals, you use the other version, which leaves them out to prevent a toxic buildup. It's all about matching the food to the water you start with.
Okay, so we've got the biology, we've got the chemistry. Now let's get down to brass tacks. How do you actually put all of this together into a routine that works? So what does weekly actually mean in numbers? It starts with this: 400 parts per million. Think of this as your absolute speed limit. This is for total dissolved solids, which means everything, the minerals already in your tap water, plus the fertilizer you add. Once you go above 400, you are officially in the danger zone for burning those delicate roots. And of course, weekly isn't the same strength all year long. You've got to adjust based on the season. In spring and summer, when your plant is pushing out new leaves and roots like crazy, you aim for a higher nitrogen level. But as things slow down in the fall and winter, you cut way back, or even stop completely to let the plant have a rest.
Now this right here is another huge key to keeping your orchid happy long term. Even when you're using a weak fertilizer, some salts are gonna build up in the pot over time. It's just inevitable. So that 4th week, when you use nothing but plain water, that's your mandatory flush. It washes out all those leftover salts and kind of resets the whole system. Whatever you do, don't skip this week. And this is how the pros do it. Seriously, these steps are a game changer. You water with plain water first to prime that velamin sponge, get it nice and damp. Then you apply your weak fertilizer solution. It helps it absorb everything more evenly. And last, and this is totally non-negotiable, you let every last drop drain out. Orchids absolutely hate having wet feet. Now, Weekly Weakly is a fantastic starting point, an amazing guideline, but it's not a rigid, unbreakable law. The final step to really mastering this is learning how to tweak the rules for your specific orchid's needs. I mean, a huge, fast-growing Vanda or Cymbidium, those guys are heavy feeders. They're hungry, and they'll want more fertilizer when they're actively growing. But then you have a delicate slipper orchid, a Paphiopedilum. It's the total opposite. It is so sensitive to salts that it needs an even weaker solution and the cleanest, purest water you can possibly give. And then you get the really special cases. A lot of popular dendrobium orchids have to have a cool, dry, and totally fertilizer-free break in the winter. If you keep watering and feeding them, sure, you might get a healthy-looking green plant, but I can promise you, you will not get any flowers. This is where knowing your specific plant makes all the difference in the world.
So, when you get right down to it, the Weekly Weakly method is about so much more than just pouring some stuff into a pot. It's really about a fundamental shift in how you think. It's asking you to stop thinking like a regular gardener feeding a plant in the ground and start thinking like a force of nature, like you're delivering a gentle, misty, nutrient-filled rain to a plant living on a tree. And that's the real secret.